Chapter 16. The Centaur's Gift. Walking the distance between the arena and the city's northern market square was a good 3 miles along crowded streets. More than likely it would take well over an hour to walk. Flying was easier. A harpy could fly the distance in a little over 10 minutes. Even Reyes, who was hardly the fastest flyer in the world, could make the trip in less than a quarter of an hour. Flying above the houses of the city, he summoned forth the wing irons that he had hidden in the hammerstone during the battle and dropped them onto the rooftops of the buildings below, being careful to hit the buildings and not to drop them into any of the streets where they might hit and kill someone. Reyes began to get a little bit of height. He could see the blue glow of the eyes in the sky lurking in his path a short way ahead and thought to fly over them. The eyes were always looking down. They watched what was happening in the city and didn't seem to care what might be passing overhead. For all the eyes knew, harpies could be fighting a private war in the sky immediately above them, and they wouldn't notice. Sooner or later, Reyes was only too aware that he was going to have to come under the scrutiny of one of the many eyes again. This bothered him more than a little. He had just escaped from the arena, and the eyes could be looking for him. They could be looking for all of them. Reyes' stomach growled angrily, reminding him again of how hungry he was. He hadn't eaten since breakfast yesterday, and now he was putting fresh demands on his system. If only he felt he could trust the elven food enough to risk some. As it was, he was going to have to remain hungry, at least until he had a chance to go hunting. He was perhaps halfway to the market, changing direction a little to scoot around another eye, when it occurred to him to check if his 2 bodyguards were still with him. Quinaggoth had been with him right there on the wall, and so he had little doubt that he would see her, but Quinnagoth had been helping him take out one of the archers' towers, so she might not even be aware Reyes had left. There was even a small possibility that she had died or been recaptured. Quinaggoth and Quinaggoth were both flying right behind him. Like most harpies, Quinaggoth could fly a lot faster than Reyes when pushed, and it was unlikely to have taken her long to catch him up once she realised that he and Quinaggoth had gone. She and Quinaggoth had taken up positions on either side of him, creating a kind of triangular formation, with Reyes at the apex. As well as Quinaggoth and Quinaggoth, Reyes had picked up a third follower. She was flying behind Quinaggoth at a respectful distance, with the blue armband she had worn in the arena still visible on her upper arm. Libnah seemed to be looking straight at him when he turned his head in her direction, as if she expected him to address her. "Libnah," Reyes called back. "Yes, goddess," Libnah replied. She flew a little faster, first catching Quinaggoth and then overtaking her a little so she could talk to Reyes from a more comfortable position. Reyes watched her until she was flying almost level with him, although she kept a respectful distance, with Quinaggoth between the two of them. "I want you to return to your village. Tell your leader to meet me at the farm that sits just 2 miles west of the city." "As I told you in the arena, goddess," Libnah replied, "I have no village. I was born in a slum part of this city called Harpy Town. There's not much of a life there. The whole place stinks to high heaven, and—" "I know it," Reyes interrupted. "I lived there for a short while myself." "So why are you still following me? You're free. You don't owe me anything." The harpy sounded very nervous as she spoke. "I've always dreamed of being a part of something greater than myself. For a while there were over 60 villages in Harpy Town. They were preparing for a war with the humans, and I was too young, too insecure in myself to build up the courage to ask if I could join them. They've left now. They've been gone about a week, and we hear news constantly about how well the war with Golespon is going. Then you appear. Lamawalk the Eternal returned from legend. I finally realised that it wasn't lack of courage that stopped me from asking to join one of the other villages. It was fate. I was destined for something much greater. I was destined to follow you. Will you allow me to join your village?" "I wouldn't, my chief," Quinaggoth advised. "We can't begin to guess at what her true motives might be." Now, dear," Libnah commented, shouting across the sky. "Don't lay an egg." "I feel I can trust her, boss," Quinaggoth offered. "If she wanted to do us harm, she could have done so easily in the arena. You'll remember how she and I acted as your bodyguards while Quinaggoth was busy." Reyes nodded. He looked back at Libnah uncertainly. Clearly his bodyguards were going to be no help in this matter. Besides, this was something that should be decided by the village's leader. Gagara might not be too happy with him if he started to make decisions that should clearly be hers. "Tell me a little about yourself." "I am Libnah, my goddess," Libnah replied. "Other than that, there isn't a lot to tell. I am 9 years old. I caught a young stag during my rite of passage and managed to get the entire creature back home single-handed. I'm also ripe and ready for a child, should you choose to send me to your male. Funny, when we first spoke back in the arena, I was certain you were the male. They called you Chief. I can see now that you aren't. Hold on, Quinnagoth commented sharply, talking over Libnah's last two sentences. We don't just send anyone to meet our male. You'll have to talk to our leader. Prove yourself worthy, and maybe... Reyes gave Quinnagoth a withering look. Never. Quinnagoth looked uncertainly at Reyes for a moment, and then realization seemed to strike her. I forget. No, it's unlikely you'll ever be sent to the male. Not any time soon, anyway. Why not? What if I proved totally loyal? Libnah asked. She sounded a little put out. I understand I might miss this year, but how about next year? I'm a good huntress, and I'm very good breeding stock. If it's a child you want, Reyes told her, you'd be better off finding another village to join. Tanegi shook her head sadly. I'm sorry, but our male is in love with the leader of our village and wants no other. I see, Libnah said doubtfully. Most harpies understand the word love, but they rarely, if ever, understand the concept. Libnah flew a little closer to Reyes. She scrutinized him for a moment as if confused, and then said, I guess you are a very lucky girl. I can't say I'm surprised, though. Any chief with access to a girl such as you might well forego all others. Reyes couldn't help but feel flattered. Why, thank you, Libnah. Forget the child for now, Libnah commented. I just want to belong. Besides, maybe when your chief sees me, she won't be able to control her hormones. You don't mind sharing, do you? Reyes laughed. You can follow us for now, Libnah, but when we get back to our village, you're going to have to take the subject up with our leader. Decisions on who gets to join us and who doesn't are her domain, and I'm not about to step on her toes. Oh, Libnah commented, surprise in her voice. I kind of thought you were the leader. I mean, you are Lammerwort. You must be the leader if you aren't the chief. No village would be so disrespectful as to not give you a commanding role. Reyes clarified. I'm the chief. The chief, Libnah laughed. I must admit, when I saw you were female, I began to wonder why one of your bodyguards insisted on calling you her chief. I've never heard of a huntress being the chief of a village. I suppose, considering who you are, I shouldn't be all that surprised, but still... Still? Reyes asked. You would hardly be capable of giving me a child, Libnah commented. No, I'm confused. What do you call your village's male? I am male, Reyes tried to explain. It's just that I use magic to hide my true identity and my true gender. That way I can travel around the city without becoming the target of every village female out looking for an easy step up the ladder. I understand, Libnah commented appraisingly. She seemed to take the revelation at face value. That explains a lot. If you're the male, though, then you really shouldn't have taken the chance of coming to Golespon with just 2 bodyguards, no matter how powerful your magic is. We tried to tell her that, Quinnagoth offered. Libnah grinned. The legends always claimed that Lammerwort was very strong-willed. There were times when Reyes wished he knew more about the legends of Lammerwort than he did. It was all very well to go around pretending to be the deity, but what if someone asked him a question about something he had supposedly done in his previous life? For a while now he'd been planning to sit down with Gagara and talk to her at length about the legends of Lammerwort from the harpy point of view. When he had left the village yesterday morning, though, he had had no idea he was going to be impersonating the deity while on this trip. As it was, Reyes couldn't help but feel a little guilty every time someone used that name to refer to him. He felt as if he was taking advantage of the situation. Lammerwort was a harpy. Maybe she would approve. Nevertheless, using the name to escape from the arena was one thing. He had been desperate. There was a whole nation counting on him to return with a blank canvas so Manglos could cast his spell, and yet continuing to use the name in order to influence and manipulate others just felt wrong. Lammerwort wasn't just a big name in harpy history. She was more than that. She was a legend. She was revered by many as a goddess, if only jokingly so by some. She was the harpy deity. Somehow during her lifetime her name had spread to nearly every harpy village in the world, and those villagers who hadn't known of her during her life knew of her now. She was Lammerwort the Eternal. She was the harpy that could wield magic, who lived to be 60, or 90, depending on who you spoke to. Every harpy knew her, and every village claimed her as one of their own. Reyes doubted it was possible to find a leader or a chief in the world that wouldn't claim to be a direct descendant of the harpy mage, given half the chance. Reyes might feel guilty about riding along on the fame of another, but he also felt it was a necessity. Lammerwort already had the love and support of every harpy in the world. To achieve the same thing would take Reyes longer than he felt he had. Besides, Reyes was a harpy, and he could use magic. He was only the second harpy in history, or legend who was capable of casting even the simplest of spells. He might not be up to the Armorwort standard, but then again, several centuries later, who can say what those stories hadn't been vastly embellished anyway? For all Reyes knew, he truly was the reincarnation of Lammerwort the Eternal, and simply didn't remember anything of his previous life. It wasn't really a long flight, and soon the main square of the Northern Market came into view. Reyes gritted his teeth and all but closed his eyes as he flew under the blue glow of an eye. He half expected the eye to teleport him right back into the cell in the arena. It didn't, seeming to pay Reyes and the others no heed whatsoever. Feeling a little relieved, Reyes landed on the rooftop of one of the shops on the south side of the square. By the look of the various marks left in the snow, he wasn't the first harpy to use this rooftop as a vantage point this morning. The Northern Market almost seemed to be a clone of the Southern Market. There were brick and mortar shops on the four sides of the square, and a large field in the middle, where a few tufts of grass were trying to survive between the wheels of some of the stalls and barrows that had been erected there. Business seemed to be good. There were a lot of people, mainly elves, moving from stall to stall, finding what bargains they made. "My chief, what is the name of the shop we're looking for?" Quinnagoth asked. She seemed eager to help. "I thought you didn't speak Alistrane," Reyes questioned. It was nice that Quinnagoth was offering to help look, but if she didn't speak the language, how would she recognise the sign? "The place we're looking for is called the Centaur's Gift." "I know it," Libnah spoke up. "You won't find it here, though." "It's not here?" Reyes asked. He didn't feel all that surprised. It was only too easy to believe that the owner of the art shop in the Southern Market sent him to the wrong place just to get rid of him. He was probably lucky that Centaur's Gift was even a real store. "It's here," Libnah replied. "It's just not in the main market square. Come on, follow me." Libnah took to the air again and hovered above the roof for a moment or two while she waited for the others to join her. "I'm still not sure I trust her, my chief," Quinnagoth commented. She was the second to take to the air, positioning herself carefully between Reyes and Libnah. "Lead the way, Libnah," Reyes declared as he and Tenegi also took to the air. As with most of the markets in the city of Golespon, the Northern Market had slowly spread out from its original location into many of the surrounding streets. Libnah took Reyes and his bodyguards along one of those streets, heading north from the market. The street had a slight curve towards the west, where it apparently seemed to flow towards another, smaller market square. The shop they sought wasn't in that small market square, but instead sat in the middle of the street that Libnah was following. She landed, rather abruptly, on the roof of one of the shops across the street. Reyes, flying only a short distance behind Libnah, had plenty of time to adjust himself for a landing. As he stretched out his legs to the roof below, though, he was almost knocked over by Quinnagoth, who was racing ahead in an attempt to keep herself between her mail and Libnah. "So," Reyes commented, giving Quinnagoth a dirty look. Libnah pointed at the shop sitting across the street from them. It was a large, impressive shop, taking up the width of three of its neighbours. The name, the Centaur's Gift, was emblazoned in large golden letters above the main doors. Being in a side street, Reyes couldn't help but think that the shop owner had been able to buy such a large place for the same price as one of the smaller shops in the actual market square. Then again, he was probably only getting a small fraction of the business stuck out here. From the slogan on the sign just above the shop's name, Reyes assumed that the place had a very elite clientele. "By appointment to the noble Dragon Emperor and his golden boys." "The Emperor is dead, you know," Libnah commented dryly. "At least, that was the news in Harpy Town just before I was grabbed." "What?" Reyes voiced, thinking about other things. "It might be no more than a baseless rumour," Libnah admitted. "I heard that she died without children. She was into children, but didn't have any of her own. They think one of her cousins is going to replace her on the throne. I doubt it will make a lot of difference to us in the long run." "Do we know who did it?" Reyes asked. He couldn't help but think about Sir Richmond offering his one-man crusade to assassinate the Emperor. Had the man succeeded? Was he even now wallowing in an elven prison awaiting a painful execution? "They suspect the Emperor's own mage advisor, Darty," Libnah commented. "Apparently she vanished at the same time the Emperor was killed, and no one seems to know what happened to her." Reyes smiled. If Sir Richmond was the assassin, then by the sound of it he had gotten away with her deed untouched. They hadn't caught him. "Humans!" someone was shouting. "Humans! Fresh from the Warren Firth! Come and get your humans today!" The voice had been shouting pretty much the same thing since Reyes had first landed on the roof, but it was only now that he and Libnah were no longer talking that he truly heard what was being said. "What is that?" Reyes asked. "Ladies and gentlemen, these are the members of a noble race. They will serve you well in the garden or in the house. They are less clumsy and more pleasing to the eye than minotaurs, trolls, ogres, or harpies. Are you tired of the same old thing? A human would even make a good companion for your bed." Libnah laughed. "We're not that far from the slave market. I'll admit I am feeling a little bit peckish, but they usually ask too much for their goods." Reyes felt he should be horrified by her suggestion, but he just sighed. It was still early morning and it had already been a long day. The city of Golespon was just wrong in so many ways. There was nothing he could do about it. He and his 3 girls wouldn't get very far if he tried to overturn the slave market, especially when the slaves would already have been given enchanted food and wouldn't know what to do with their newly found freedom. "There has been a large influx of humans lately, due to the war," Libnah was saying. "They're only now really starting to hit the market." "You 3 wait here," Reyes commanded, changing the subject. "I'd better go and do my shopping." "Chief," Quinnagoth protested. "Wait here," Reyes insisted. Without further argument he took to the air, gaining a few feet before swooping down to the street below and landing outside the large, friendly-looking doors of the Centaur's gift. This was a large place, and by the look of it far more suitable to his needs. There was a wide array of sculpting materials and untouched blocks of various types of stone, including marble. There were easels, both large and small, and blank canvases of all sizes and even a few unusual shapes. There was also a large selection of paints available to the budding young artist. They were kept close to the counter, and by the looks of them, were sold by quantity, depending on the type and colour of the paint. As well as catering to the paint and chisel brigade, the shop had a lot of equipment that could be used to polish ordinary stones. There were tumblers, corundum of various types, and even machines to rest tumblers on so that they could be turned by hand, or, if the shopper was willing to pay enough, magic. It was also possible to buy both polished and unpolished stones here. Although Reyes was here to purchase a canvas for Manglos, he seriously considered getting some of the stone polishing stuff as a gift for his girlfriend. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I help you?" Despite the name of the store, the owner was an elf. He seemed jovial enough, and was in a much better mood than the elf in the store in the southern market. For one thing, he didn't immediately grab a tool from under his counter and threaten to attack Reyes with it. There was also one other detail that made Reyes appreciate this place a whole lot more. "You speak harpy," Reyes said, a little surprised. "Harpy, goblin, all 4 Elven languages. I even have a smattering of flourish. In my business it pays to be able to communicate with your clientele. I assume you're here for the stones," the owner commented, waving a hand over the section of stone polishing equipment. "I'll admit, the stones are interesting," Reyes replied. With so many language skills, he was surprised that the elf hadn't been conscripted into the army, but he decided not to mention his faults. "No, I'm looking for a canvas. The biggest you have in stock." "Bigger, if possible." "A canvas?" the owner replied, sounding a little uncertain. "I've never heard of one of your race wanting to paint before. Still, who am I to judge?" He glanced across the shop at the far wall. There, a large canvas had been spread out on a makeshift frame in order to display its size. It was resting lightly between 2 very small canvases, to create an illusion that it was even bigger than it actually was. "I think that's the largest I have." "I'll take it," Reyes told the elf. "Are you sure you want something so large? If you're just starting to get into painting, you might be better off with something a little more manageable," the elf advised cheerfully. "That'll be fine, unless you can find me something bigger," Reyes commented. "How much are we talking here?" The elf seemed to be sizing Reyes up. He seemed to be noticing that Reyes had no visible cash on him. Well, let's see. A normal canvas would cost somewhere in the region of 1,000 durin. You see, the canvas itself takes a long time to prepare, and..." "How much?" Reyes pressed. "I'd have to ask for no less than 15,000, the owner said uncertainly. "Will you be back with the money?" Reyes couldn't help but feel a little bit suspicious. Was the owner of his shop genuine in his apparent friendliness towards Reyes? Or was it more of a case that money was money no matter where it came from? Would an elven client be charged the same price for the same item? "How much is that in gold?" "Gold?" the shop owner repeated. "About 1.5 ounces, I suppose, assuming it was pure gold." Reyes nodded. That was a sum he understood. It also gave him a basis for comparison. An ounce of gold was worth about 10,000 durin. Reyes brought his money bag out from the hammerstone, opened it, and selected 2 of the golden coins. "These weigh about an ounce each. I'd also like to grab some of your stone polishing equipment, and maybe a small bag of both polished and unpolished stones." "The canvas is yours," the shopkeeper replied, taking the coins only too happily. "Come, Show me which stones you'd like to purchase. A short while later, Reyes emerged from the shop with the canvas, stones, and polishing equipment stored neatly away in his ring. He flew up to the roof of the shop opposite, where Quinnagoth, Quinaggoth, and Libnah were perched, waiting for him. All sorted, boss? Quinaggoth asked as he came into land. All sorted, Reyes agreed. So what's next on the agenda? Quinnagoth asked. First, I think I need something to eat, so maybe we should go hunting. Then we need to make our way to the Hennigs farm and meet with the village leaders. I hope you know what you're doing, Quinnagoth commented. I feel uncomfortable with the idea of putting you in harm's way like that.